Oh, hello. Welcome to MBA Bar Talks, and this is the Legal Legends series. I'm Adam Johnson, and with my co-host Janika White, we will be interviewing stalwarts of the Memphis legal community to get the oral history of both themselves and the city. We hope you enjoy it, and today's guest is Prince Chambliss. Good morning, Janika. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Adam?
I'm great. We are excited to have Prince Chambliss here with us today. How are you doing this morning?
Doing well, thank you.
Oh, good. Well, thank you for being here. We have some questions for you about you and your life, starting really at the beginning. So as I understand it, you grew up in Birmingham, Alabama in the 50s and 60s?
I did, a long time ago.
And what was that like?
Different than now.
Yeah. In what ways?
In many ways. There's an expression about throwing the baby out along with the bath. Young people will instantly get the wrong idea, I think. But a lot of things that we lost when we were able to throw away segregation, there were some aspects that we should have tried to keep. Not segregation, but the way we felt about each other and the way other people felt about each other. And I think we lost some.
Yeah. Can you give us an example?
The school systems were separate, and they were supposed to be but equal. That was a joke. The equipment, the books, materials were not equal, but the people, teachers, the administrators, young black students felt loved in their schools, and people cared about us, and people made a way for us. It was nice to be in an all-black. Of course, we weren't saying black way back then, but people cared about people, and you could tell. And I think it made a difference. A lot of people did a lot with very little. I wish we could find a way to get some of that back.
Right.
Do you, and I know this is probably not directly what we're here to talk about, but I'm really curious, do you see or have you thought about ways that we get back to a more neighborly and more loving and concerned society?
Well, of course, it's come across my mind, and I've thought about it, but as I was telling you a few minutes ago, I have a lot going on in my life, and kind of hard to find time to think about all the things that I want to think about. But I do think about it from time to time.
So even before you're born, apparently your grandfather, Luther Chambliss, was the first black law school graduate in Alabama. Is that true?
Well,
Or one of the first?
what's said is that he was the first black law student to pass the bar in the state of Alabama.
Wow.
It's generally thought that there were other black people admitted to the bar before he was, but he was the one who graduated from a school and had a degree prior to taking the bar exam.
Did you have a relationship with him?
Unfortunately, no. And I'm glad that science and modern medicine has made some progress. I think he passed from some things that they had not advanced with medicine that I may not be living today. He had some heart problems, I think.
Obviously, you're a lawyer. Did knowing that about him have any role or effect on you becoming a lawyer later?
It did. I knew that someone in my family had done it, and it could be done. I wasn't sure that I could do it, but I was going to give it a try.
You've done a great job at it, too.
Well, thank you.
So how old were you when you decided you wanted to be a lawyer?
Well, actually, I was in my teens because early on, I thought I was going to be a scientist or a doctor. The thing about growing up in the South particularly, there are a lot of insects, there are a lot of animals. You spend a lot of time outdoors. I had explored quite a bit. There was something that separated our neighborhood, and it was a ditch. And when you say ditch, I mean, that doesn't sound very clean, and it doesn't sound like something you want to be around. But when I was a child, ditches weren't all bad. The ditch that separated our neighborhood from another neighborhood, there were fish in it. There were tadpoles in it. There were frogs in it, crayfish in it. And the ditch separated the neighborhoods, but it brought the kids together. We could all wade in the ditch. We could all fish for tadpoles, try to catch frogs, try to catch crayfish, and we got to know each other, meeting at the ditch.
Did you meet a lot of best friends there?
Not best friends. I had best friends when I got to the ditch.
Gotcha. One fact people may not know about you was that you were nearby during the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in September of 1963. Do you remember that?
Oh, absolutely. What I hadn't thought about much, that church is famous. It's called 16th Street Baptist Church. I hadn't really thought about this, but I lived, my home house, and it's still there, is on 6th Avenue in Birmingham, and we lived almost downtown, and that's where 16th Street Baptist Church is. And I hadn't really thought about this. 16th Street Baptist Church, my house is 405 6th Avenue North. 16th Street Baptist Church is on 16th Street North, but it faces 6th Avenue North. My house is on the same street that 16th Street Baptist Church sits on. And we lived at 4th Street and 3rd Street, in between 4th and 3rd on 6th Avenue. 16th Street Baptist Church was at 16th Street Church and 6th Avenue. Okay. And people who know city blocks, a city block and 12 city blocks is considered a mile. So I literally lived a mile from 16th Street Baptist Church, just right down the street. And our family church was at 7th Avenue and 11th Avenue. So my church is on 7th Avenue, 16th Street Baptist Church is on 6th Avenue, and my church was at 12th Street. So it was 4 blocks down from 16th Street Baptist Church. So on the day that the bomb went off at 16th Street Baptist Church, I was 4 blocks away. And
you were at church at the time?
I was at church.
Oh, wow.
I was in Sunday school, and we heard the bomb. But before that, I'd like to mention my wife is also from Birmingham, and she didn't like for me to talk about it, but we were in the same grade. And so her best friend invited her to go to 16th Street Baptist Church that particular Sunday. It was Youth Sunday. And so her friend, Carol, invited my wife to go to her church for that occasion. And so Patricia told her dad, Carol invited me to her church. And her dad said, oh, well, that's nice, that's fine. And he didn't pay much attention. And that was early in the week. Later in the week, as the weekend was approaching, he said, Patricia, what is the name of Carol's church? And she said, 16th Street Baptist Church. He said, no, you can't go. And, she was 14, 15, something like that. And I mean, she really wanted to go and didn't see why her dad would not let her go. But 16th Street Baptist Church was Dr. King's headquarters. And that's where he organized, that's where he held the meetings. Because of the way things were, adults weren't always free to do whatever it was they wanted to do.
Right.
They had employment. And if you didn't please the person you worked for, they might choose for you to no longer work for them. And so Dr. King and the people who were organizing decided, we're going to let the children do this. Children don't work. That's the way it was organized. But it was well known, and they had started calling Birmingham Bombingham. There were so many bombs. I mean, they were everywhere. And on a Sunday morning, a church was bombed, and 4 little girls were killed. And it just so happened. I mean, when the bomb went off, I was in church in Sunday school, and when we heard it, we knew it was a bomb. We didn't know where. We went outside. You could see the smoke. It was over 16th Street Baptist Church. And I looked at a couple of my friends, and they looked at me, and I mean, we knew we were living history. And so would we not go to the church after a bomb? Of course we would. We wouldn't stay. So
how old were you?
I think I'm not sure. I think I was 14 or 15. See, I have a birthday next month, and so I have trouble keeping up in the fall with exactly how old I am. But I was 14 or 15. And so we ran to the church. And the 4 who were killed, one was my wife's best friend, Carol Robinson, who was in our class.
Is that the one that invited her to church?
That's the one that invited her to church. My homeroom teacher's daughter was killed. A girl in my homeroom was killed, and a girl that I knew was killed. Now, the sister of a girl in my homeroom was blinded. She didn't get killed. And she's been on a lifelong quest for someone to write her a check, and no one has. She goes all over speaking, talking, telling people, and for some reason she can't get anyone to fund her. And the reason that we say, I mean, people in the neighborhood, she was younger than the other girls. And what happened was the bomb was outside the exterior wall of the church. The wall inside the church was the ladies' restroom, and it was the mirror for the ladies' restroom. And I have no doubt if my wife had been permitted to go to 16th Street Baptist Church with her friend Carol, she would not have survived. Patricia has never seen a mirror that she didn't like. I mean, she's an attractive. I married her, so I think she's pretty. But I'd be doggone. She never gets tired of seeing her image in a mirror. And so they wouldn't let the younger girls get close to the mirror. They were able to keep them out, and by keeping them out, they didn't die. It's amazing how the world works.
Right.
The big girls crowd in and get close to the mirror. The little girls get crowded out, and the big girls get killed.
So I heard you may or may not have run into Malcolm X at the funeral.
May or may not. That's correct. There was a well-dressed gentleman there who came to assist me, as there was a huge crowd outside of the church and not many seats inside. He sought out the story that I told about being president of my class and knowing the girls, and this man who I thought may have resembled Malcolm X. And I knew that Malcolm X traveled in the South incognito. But anyway, he helped me to get into the church where I could sit and I could see. Yeah, I didn't learn anything about him and didn't know much about him. I was just happy to be inside of the church and be able to see Dr. King and hear.
It's an interesting story. In high school, a Quaker organization identified you as one of the brightest black students in the South and invited you to finish high school in what they call a progressive program in Connecticut. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I'm not sure anyone said anything about the brightest black kids in the South, but there were some standardized exams that were administered. And if you scored well on this exam, it was decided that you should be included in the group that was designated to live in the Northeast in the home of a white family and finish the last 2 years high school. I was chosen, and I just happened to mention to you the way that my life has been. It's been like that, and I'm always expecting the very best. I'm always expecting things to go right, and I never expect anything to go wrong. And if it does go wrong, I think it's going to go right soon thereafter. And so.
So you're a natural optimist.
I am. I'm the original eternal optimist, and things generally bear me out. So I was selected to live in the home of a white family in suburban Connecticut, and it was like going from being really having nothing and being nobody to being in a place where, I mean, people had real money. And the thing that I noticed about living in the home with the white family was that when there would be commercials on television, I thought of the commercials where the women put the curlers in their hair. A lot of times things that are on television would have nothing to do with me and nothing to do with people that I knew. And I realized sitting in the home watching television with these white people, everything was for them. It was their world. Mm-hmm. Everything was for them. They didn't have to go somewhere else and not paying attention to the television because it was talking to them. I mean, so many times it wasn't talking to me. But what I have to tell you, before I got to Connecticut, some newspaper reporters called my parents and they asked my parents, how do you feel about your son going to a place to go to school where the people there don't want him to come? My parents said, say what? This was news to them. It was certainly news to me, and it kind of hurt my feelings. I was looking forward to going to Connecticut. And it turned out I've gotten into trouble because of this, but there was an organization called the John Birch Society. And poor Mr. John Birch didn't have anything to do with the organization. These people just selected his name as the name of their organization. And their organization wasn't about doing things to make people feel good. They didn't want me to attend that school, and they were doing all they could to keep me from attending. But it turned out, and I have to say this because the John Birch Society as a group apparently didn't do anything, but it was a known fact that they didn't want me to attend. But, somebody did something because they had all these meetings and things. And so this school, Ridgefield High School in Ridgefield, Connecticut, Fairfield County, Connecticut, one of the most wealthiest places in this country, they had programs, I think it was called the American Field Service Program, where they had students living in homes in that town who were from other countries. They were from England, they were from France, they were from Spain, they were from Germany, they were from Italy, and they were living in the homes with the families, and they were going to the high school and nobody said anything. They go and get somebody from Birmingham, Alabama, and they want to bring them up, and all of a sudden people are saying, well, he's not a resident. He can't go to our school. Well, it turned out they would allow non-residents to attend the school, but you had to pay non-resident tuition. And so a group of people in the town said, well, we'll pay his non-resident tuition, and in order to do that, we're going to get our good friend Dave Brubeck, the jazz musician. Now, I thought he lived in a nearby town, and I'm not sure where he lived, but I did meet him and his sons, and he played concerts. And people paid money to come to the concerts, and they knew the money was going to go to pay my non-resident tuition. And so what they said was that while we raised Prince's non-resident tuition for high school, why don't we go ahead and raise as much money as we can? And so when he goes to college, anything that his college won't pay, we'll have money here in this fund to pay. So that's a perfect example of something really bad turning into something really good.
Really good.
So my parents liked the idea of money being paid for my college that they didn't have to come up with. And if the people hadn't come out opposed and made them raise the money, then they never would have raised the money. Then they would have had to pay. So anyway, that worked out fine. I lived with the family, and I finished my 2 years of high school. And those were just really, really nice times. But I tell you, I compared that to some other times. I was the only black student in the high school. I think sometimes somebody had been able to attend, but nobody was there. I was the only one. It's something about being the only one. I learned when I went to college, that college made an effort. And so it just so happened the college that I went to was like the number one college in the country to try to bring in black students and to try to make things, and they had a lot of money. They had made wise investments. And so I had a good time as a young person because people were trying to do good, and they did a lot of good.
And so when you were in high school, you felt accepted at that school?
The kids, everybody. It was very, very good, very nice. And not only that, but the program would get us together because they wanted a clear contrast. Mm-hmm. They only wanted one black student in each town. And so they would get us together out on Long Island. I first learned about Hamptons. The Hamptons are on Long Island. I learned that because these people took us there to this huge mansion, and tennis courts and swimming pools, and then they would get all of the black kids who were up from the South would gather us together, and we could compare notes, and it was really nice. Nice program.
Wow, sounds like a great experience.
It was.
So you mentioned your mom was a social worker. Your mom was a social worker?
Yes.
And I read that during your college years, you then worked for an anti-poverty agency in New York City.
Yes, life is not a straight line. When you're young, sometimes you do things that you realize it might have been better if you hadn't done those things. And so I left my college. I went to New York City. I lived on the Lower East Side. It's just amazing. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. I was going to school in Connecticut, know nothing about New York. I end up in New York City, maybe 19 years old, and the people who had raised the money for me that they were going to pay things in college, they thought that this was a huge mistake. Why are you leaving school? And maybe I shouldn't say much about, but the thing about school, the Afro hairdos, we didn't just say, hey, let's grow our hair long and we'll have afros. There weren't any picks or combs or anything, but what happened, the people in the town didn't know how to cut black hair. And so the guy, and it was an all-boys school, which didn't help things because we didn't have to comb our hair. There were no girls there. So we let our hair grow until we went home to get haircuts. Now, I was in Connecticut. Alabama's a long way from Connecticut. I didn't get to Alabama often, and so I didn't get my hair often, and my hair got very long. And I think that's how we got afros.
Wow, and I guess just for context, for our purposes, that's like around, 1965, 1966?
Yeah, that was. Yeah, 67, 68.
Yeah. I was just counting backwards because I know the Birmingham, the bombing was in 1963, and I think you said you were around 14 or 15 then, so I was thinking last 2 years in high school, let's count up 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So when I was reading about your time in New York, it mentioned that you may have become friends with some jazz musicians.
That is true.
Anyone
that was
we
a
know?
musician, Astro Infinity, Arkansas. And it turns out This jazz musician who started this group about the Astro Infinity Orchestra was born in Birmingham, of all places. But anyway, he had a lot of musicians with him, and so typically what happened when the band would play, after they played, they kind of interact with the kids and the students, and we get to know them a little. And so when I went down to New York, I met some of the same people who had been up to Connecticut to the college performing, and we worked in some of the same programs together. And so they were jazz musicians, but a lot of times that doesn't pay what needs to be paid, and so they had other employment. Before it was over, I took them back to Connecticut with me, and one of them became a professor teaching music at the university where I attended.
Is that Wesleyan?
Wesleyan,
yeah.
yeah.
One of the other notes from there was that you became involved with the Black Panther Party. What was that like?
Yeah, that was different. I was 19, and these jazz musicians were a lot older and knew a lot more than I did. And they pretty much said, it's time for us to join the Black Panther Party. And I have visions of my parents and family thinking of me as being in the Black Panther Party when I'm supposed to be in school. But what I've told people is that if you were 19 years old at the time that I was 19 years old, and you look like me, and you didn't join the Black Panther Party, you had no heart. So a few years later, I found myself going to law school, and what I've told people is that if you were 25 years old at the time that I was 25 years old, and you weren't enrolled in a law school, you have no brains. So life is not a straight line. I mean, it can be a circle. But I've done some things I probably shouldn't have done, but I've done some things I'm glad I did too.
Right.
It's all part of the experience.
Yes.
Well, speaking of law school, as you mentioned, you went to Harvard Law, and apparently Mitt Romney was a classmate of yours?
Mitt Romney and I were in the same section.
And how big were the sections then?
At least 100 and something. There were about 500 students in each class, and I can't remember how many sections there were, but I think it was maybe 110 or something like that. So I got to know Mitt mainly because I wanted to. I'm making noise about Black Panther Party and being somewhat of a radical, but I like what I like, and I like Mitt Romney's father had run to be elected president, and I liked what he was saying, some of the things he was saying. Unfortunately for him, he had been the head of an automobile manufacturing company. He didn't have any foreign policy experience. So the first chance he got, he went to Vietnam so that he could talk about what he had seen, and he came back, and his report was that everything was fine, that we were doing Vietnam, and people were happy, and the next thing you know, the Viet Cong had taken over in Saigon and were shooting and marching up and down the streets. And people say, well, Governor Romney, you said everything was fine. Clearly it's not. And if you've been misled in this kind of a way, we don't think you make good material to be in the White House. And so he quickly gave it up. I mean, he just didn't even campaign anymore. And so I met Mitt, I was 71, and hadn't been that much time. I think it was 68 when he was running. And so I was speaking good of his dad, but he didn't seem to like to talk about that and whatnot. And so we didn't become good friends. In fact, he didn't speak to me. So. But we also had, who else was? Chuck Schumer was also in our class.
Oh, really?
Now I have to say I did not know Chuck Schumer. And in fact, neither Chuck Schumer, not Mitt Romney, now, to my knowledge, did not attend the class reunions. I attended the ones on the fives. So I've been to quite a few of them, but I never saw either one of them. Now, of course, they're busy trying to run the world, so they may not have time to attend class reunions.
How was your experience at Harvard?
Intimidating. Intimidating, but I did the best I could, and fortunately it seemed to be good enough. But met a lot of people who knew a lot, and one thing, I went straight through from college through law school, but a lot of people didn't, and I'm not sure that I care for that very much because I was very young, and there were people in my class who had PhD degrees, master's degrees, had done a lot of things, and all I had done was gone to college and then was going to law school. And I felt like I had missed a lot and felt like a lot of people were ahead of me in a number of ways. But like I said, I did the best I could. And I enjoyed the experience. And just being there with so many people who were so talented, I mean, intimidating.
So we were just talking about your law school experience. And you moved to Memphis in 1976?
I did.
As a city, what was Memphis like back then?
we felt like we were getting in on the ground floor. There were no real big hotels, no big restaurants. Beale Street was gone. It just seemed like Memphis was due for a lot of good things to happen. I mean, that's the way it felt like to me. I was parking in a dirt parking lot, downtown Memphis. It was dirt. It was actually mud because it rained a lot. And I paid 35 cents to park all day. And I was parking right next to the Peabody Hotel. I mean, my car was rubbing up against the Peabody Hotel, which was closed, and I said, this has got to change. And sure enough, each year was better than the year before. It was amazing. It was amazing. And then I'd gone to school with people from Memphis, which is how I got to Memphis. I didn't think to come to Memphis on my own. Everybody in Birmingham was going to Atlanta. But I tend not to do what everybody else does. I'm just determined to go my own way. I had in fact, that's one of the reasons I was going back to Birmingham, because everybody else was going to Atlanta. I wasn't going.
And I was going to ask you, how did you end up in Memphis? I know you just said friends, but what happened that made you come to Memphis?
Some people may know Percy Harvey. In fact, the first time Patricia and I ever came to Memphis was when Percy Harvey got married. The first time he got married, his wife passed, but Percy's wife and Patricia were like really, really good friends. I mean, they were like best friends, really. Because in addition to going to college together at Wesleyan, Percy and I had also gone to Harvard Law School together. Now, he was behind me, but we were really good friends. And so when he said, I'm going to get married, I think I had gotten married the year before. And so Percy got married the year after I did. And of course, he invited us to come to Memphis. And he was telling me from day one, he said, you need to be coming to Memphis anyway, because those people in Birmingham are not going to hire you. And it turned out he was right.
And so when you came to Memphis, what did you do?
Well, I practiced law, and I was amazed because I could kind of tell, because the lawyers in Birmingham, I mean, it was like there was something that was preventing them from doing what they might have done if there hadn't been something there, and nobody wanted to talk about it. But here in Memphis, the biggest law firm was here in Memphis, and
what law firm was that?
The Armstrong Allen law firm.
Okay.
And when I said biggest, I mean, they had like 22 lawyers. High School Donaldson, which became Baker Donaldson, had 15 or 16 lawyers or something. But they were the biggest. And they were also the ones, they did the big firm things. I mean, when people looked in Martindale Hubbell, they looked for Armstrong Allen. And so Armstrong Allen represented everybody. I mean, just everybody. And they had the biggest private law library in the state. And I was surprised they let other lawyers from other law firms come and use their law library.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
And what were the lawyers and judges in Memphis like during that period?
Well, I didn't have any real problems, but you had to be correct. I mean, you had to be prepared, and I found that I was able to do what I needed to do, and I didn't have any problem, but you had to be correct.
So when you were practicing, or when you first started practicing here in Memphis, what were your areas of practice?
Trial work. I've always been a trial lawyer. That's what I wanted to do, and that's what I wanted to do in Birmingham. I wanted to go to court, and I wanted to represent big clients. I just had it in my mind that I should be able to do that. I mean, I'd gone to good schools. I'd done well in school, and that's what I wanted to do. And Armstrong Allen made it clear that if I came here, that's what I would do. And that's what I would do when I came here. Now, they did ask me about doing Title VII and discrimination work. And I did say, well, if I'm here and the firm does it, I'm willing to do it, but I prefer doing something else. And so I primarily did something else that involved trial work for large clients.
What do you see as the big, or if there is a difference, between trial work then versus now?
Well, there's a lot more trial work.
Right.
We did have trials. It seems like trials are disappearing. I mean, they're just few and far and hard to come by. But back then, there was a lot of trial work.
My thought is during this time, you're saying, okay, you don't want to handle these big cases. When you think back, what's that big case that you can remember that really stands out?
Oh, there were lots of big cases. There were lots of times that I thought I might see myself in the newspaper, and not in a real good way, because, I mean, things happen. I remember representing a company that made some kind of a product that you applied to a commercial roof. I was in the law library when Thomas Pruitt, one of our legendary trial lawyers, was working on something. I heard what he said he was working on, and I looked up and found something that really kind of took all the wind out of the case and made it an easy verdict for the defendants. And Tom Pruitt kind of gave me a left-handed compliment. He said before I got involved with his case, he was planning a trip to Kenya, which is Holiday Inns had a contractor that they had building hotels in Kenya, and the man was suing, the subcontractor sued Holiday Inns because he said they didn't pay him what they owed him. And it turned out he was saying that he owed these subcontractors, but he hadn't paid them. And I found a law that said you can't sue somebody for a bill that you owe. You have to pay your bill. And if the bill's paid, then you can ask the judge to give you a judgment. But you can't get a judgment for a bill you haven't paid. And Pruitt thought that was the wonderful, just great stuff that he heard, and he was able to just wipe that case out because of that law.
And so I guess that's the great casework that led to you being, from my understanding, the first black partner at a large firm in Memphis. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. He was on my side when it came to partnership questions.
But I mean, I'm talking about you. Didn't you become?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And what was that journey like to becoming a partner?
Well, I never heard the word junior partner until I became a partner. I should have imagined that was there, but you think you're going to be, all I knew was partners and associates. Mm-hmm. And I was looking forward to being a partner. Mm-hmm. I hadn't thought about, I got to be a junior partner first.
Right. Was that something specific to you?
No.
Okay.
No. I had company among the junior partners.
Well, speaking of first, so you were also the first black president of the Memphis Bar Association, and then the first black president of the Tennessee Board of Law Examiners. So for many of us, we would consider that being a trailblazer. And so can you speak to us about that experience? Well,
there are things that I enjoy doing, and practicing law is just one of them. And they say if you enjoy what you do for a living, you'll never work a day in your life. I've been 50 years, and I just love it. And what I love is you have an opportunity to help people. I can't tell you, I probably shouldn't tell you, but everybody doesn't think the same way that I do. And I just always think of helping people. It just of course, my family was like that. My paternal grandmother lived with us, and she literally raised me. And she was a Seventh-day Adventist. I don't know if you know about Seventh-day. There's something about those people. And so my own parents were CMEs, Christian Methodist Episcopal, which is a denomination that's made in Memphis. It's made in Tennessee. The worldwide headquarters for my church is Memphis. And so when I came here, moved from Birmingham to Memphis, my father is a CME preacher. I knew I would join a church when I came here, but we kind of took our time, and he thought we were taking too much time. We needed to get in a church. And it's funny because if we had joined a church before we did, we wouldn't have joined the church that we joined, because the church just bought the physical plant like right before we started going, and it's just amazing how my life has been. We joined this wonderful church. Of course, joining a church, it's kind of like a fraternity. When you go on Pledge Day, or when you just get, everything seems wonderful. Then after you join, things seem to, the choir doesn't seem to be as big, and the people don't seem, but it's been nice.
From the MBA perspective, what was it like being president?
Well, like I said, I enjoy it. And so I was looking forward to doing the things that the president was supposed to do, because those are the kinds of things that I enjoy doing and want to do. And so I would think of things. You would write these columns.
So we have you to thank for that.
Well, it seemed different. What I was writing seemed, and of course, you should look at my book, because I think what I was doing was a lot more involved. Because, I don't know, that's what we did. So I was looking forward to having a chance to do that. And for me not to have a chance to do that, I would have been disappointed. And so I'm glad I had a chance to do it.
Well, speaking of your scrapbook, it is currently an exhibit at the Museum of Science and History, formerly the Pink Palace, and so people can go check that out. But what was your favorite memory from that year?
Well, I don't know if that's a favorite, but the Republicans ought to be a time out for politics. When it comes to law, we ought to be trying to have law work as well as it can. And to make judges run as politicians where they have to join parties, I don't think that's right. And I don't think there's a Republican way of being a judge or a Democratic way of being a judge. It's just a judge. And you want a good judge, and you don't want a judge thinking about Republicans and Democrats. You want them thinking about justice. And so that was a big effort made to have partisan primaries for judges, and somehow we managed, I don't know, I think maybe they just felt sorry for us, but I mean, we were saying, we don't want this, don't do this. And somehow they didn't do it, although it seemed like they had everything lined up where they could have done it if they wanted to. And I think they just said, well, they really don't want it, maybe they shouldn't have it, and so they didn't do it. And I think it was a miracle because it looked like it was there's nothing we could do. They weren't paying us any attention.
That's quite a legacy. Speaking of legacies, what advice would you have for young lawyers in terms of practice coming up as a lawyer?
Well, along the way, I can remember when I would invite students who were clerking for law firms during the summer. And so there were these big restaurants at the top of these buildings, and I had a membership because of the firm that I was in, and I would gather them. I would find and invite them and talk to them, and I paid for it. Of course, I was making more money than I thought I'd ever make. But it got to a point where I got the Ben Jones chapter to take over that because I was funding it. I mean, I just thought it was a good thing for these young law students to get together, to know each other, and to know that there are people here that want them to succeed and will help them in any way they can. And so finally got so big that I couldn't keep doing it, and the Ben Jones chapter took it over.
Yeah, they just had that reception this past weekend for
Yeah.
the new law students.
Yeah.
Wow, that is amazing. I never knew that you started that.
Yeah.
Speaking of students, are you still an adjunct professor at the law school?
I finally stopped, and I did it in the nick of time because it turns out I didn't even know how long I'd been doing it, and I asked them how, and they said 14 years, and so I decided 14 years was enough, and it was just, I mean, I've got the thing at home with my wife, and then the COVID came and got me, and then there's some other things that are going on, and so the thing about teaching that.
And what did you teach?
They called it litigation draft, and if they had let me name it, I would have called it trial practice. And everybody wants to be a litigator, and to me, litigator sounds too much. An alligator and litigator sound too much alike, and they don't sound like endearing terms to me. And so I'd much rather be a trial lawyer. But I've confessed to my students that I'm really a pretrial lawyer. Not too many trials, but there are a lot of pretrial things you can do.
So in your 14 years of teaching, did you notice changes with students, like generational changes, or is a law student a law student?
No, I don't think I know. I noticed that there's some smart students at the University of Memphis. I mean, very smart. I went to this big law school, nothing on these students down. They're very smart. I'm just impressed with the students in Memphis.
So you're saying University of Memphis students are smarter than Harvard students?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say that, but I'm sure there's some that are, and no question about that. No question about that.
So I think Adam did ask, like, what advice would you give to a young lawyer with legacy? It looks like you're about to say something.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, and that came up all the time because I was doing this thing in the summer where the students would be, and so I would say things. If you don't know, you need to ask someone. And then I would try to tell students, even at school when I'm teaching, lawyers know that law students don't know everything, and we know you all know a lot because you're in school and you're reading the books. So you got to know something, but we know that you don't know a lot, and so when we find that you don't know something, we're not surprised, and you shouldn't be embarrassed. I mean, you can't know everything. Right. And so you just need to ask. And so most law students tend not to want to ask questions and tend not to want to exhibit what they don't know. But those of us who have been there already, we know you don't know everything. And you shouldn't feel any bad feelings about not knowing everything, because nobody does.
What prompted you to write your book, Prince of Peace?
Well, I bet it's a rare lawyer that doesn't think about writing a book. I think most lawyers would think, before I'm done with this, a book's going to come out of here somehow. I don't know, but I'm going to be involved with the book. I think most do. So I always had that thought I would have a book. I think most of us would like to share information with other people, and we want people to share information with us. And so if you share, someone else may be inclined to share. So I was always willing to share.
So my dad always tells us life is an ongoing process. And so now when we've sat here and we've kind of gone through your life and just some of the amazing turns that it took all the way from a child and even now, what is something, like not necessarily in terms of to a lawyer, but just in being able to manage and deal with life, what would you tell young people? What would you say is that like anchor?
Anchor?
Yeah. that thing that just keeps you going to say, I'm on the right track or I'm going in the right direction. I'm okay.
Well, you've got to be engaged, involved, and part of what's going on. And you do what you're supposed to do. And if you do what you're supposed to do, things ought to be fine. I mean, whatever it is that's going on, you need to be involved in it, and you need to be part of it, and you need to be making things happen.
Well, I think that's an excellent way to end things. Mr. Chambliss, thank you so much for being with us today. I thought it was very educational, so thank you very much for your time.
Fascinating.
I thank you both very much. I didn't know how this was going to go, but the way you sit there and you ask questions, somehow I'm able to come up with answers. I appreciate it.
Did a great job.
You definitely did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.